Hello! I'm the Hulk. Nope. I'm Jimmy Chan. Remember, the Spirit of the Lord power. It's like Hulk you out power. Become the Hulk. Alright, we are reading 1 Samuel 17. It's getting very exciting. In earlier videos, you have to watch my earlier videos. King David, this David fellow, he's a very famous character. I believe he's a real person that existed a long time ago. Right now he's in heaven, He's called a hero of the faith. Very important. Not as important as the Lord Jesus, King Jesus, but also very important in Holy Bible history. So let's read this. Again, this is First Samuel 17. It is titled David and Goliath, or David versus Goliath. They're not together. They're not friends. David versus Goliath. Now the Philistines gathered their forces for war and assembled at Soko in Judah. They pitched camp at Ephes Damim between Soko and Azekah. Saul is the king at this time. Saul and the Israelites assembled and camped in the valley of Elah and drew up their battle line. So a battle line is, they line up. You've seen in a movie, perhaps you have, in the movie Avengers. They line up this way, like side to side. So they create a battle line, like you draw a line on the ground, It's like you draw a line on the ground. They drew up their battle line. There's soldiers, side to side, and then the soldiers behind those soldiers drew up their battle line to meet the Philistines. The Philistines occupied one hill, and the Israelites another. So there's two hills, with the valley between them. So that is very dramatic, so to speak. You have to watch a lot of movies. There's a valley, and then probably think of it more 3D. There's a hill over here. There's a valley, right? And then there's like a hill like over here, and they're on top of these hills. The armies are one here, one here. They're gonna charge at each other and totally try to kill each other in the valley that's in between these hills. Very dramatic. Powerful story. Powerful. A champion named Goliath, who was from Gath, came out of the Philistine camp. So he stepped forward. His height was 6 cubits and a span. So let's look at the note. Let's see how tall he was. 9 feet, 9 inches. 9 feet tall. I don't know if you've actually met basketball players. When they're taller than 7 feet, that is very tall. So there's 6 feet tall, people who are 6 feet tall, and then 7 feet tall. That's like 1 foot plus. But he is 9 feet tall. Two feet taller than basketball players in the NBA. He had a bronze helmet on his head and wore a coat of scale armor of bronze, weighing 5,000 shekels. On his legs he wore bronze greaves, and a bronze javelin was slung on his back. His spear shaft was like a weaver's rod, and its iron point weighed 600 shekels. So remember, a shekel here, let's look at the note. A shekel is, well, this note says 125 pounds. So his armor weighed more than 100 pounds. Yeah, his helmet and his armor weighed more than 100 pounds. His shield bearer went ahead of him. Goliath stood and shouted to the ranks of Israel, "Why do you come out and line up for battle? Am I not a Philistine, and are you not the servants of Saul? Choose a man and have him come down to me. If he is able to fight and kill me, we will become your subjects. But if I overcome him and kill him, you will become our subjects and serve us." Then the Philistines said, "This day I defy the armies of Israel. Give me a man, and let us fight each other." On hearing the Philistines' words, Saul and all the Israelites were dismayed and terrified. So dismayed is sort of like they went, oh, you know. So this giant Goliath, he's being kind of tricky, you know. But I think he is honorable. That means it's strange, you know. There are two armies ready to fight, and then they're not going to fight. That's what I mean by it's tricky. But I think he's, you know, he's not lying. You know, if someone from Israel could beat him, which, I mean, when you think about it, like, who can kill that guy? You know, he's 9 feet tall and big, you know, strong, and he's trained. He was trained to fight. Then if someone from Israel, one man, you know, can kill him, then the Israelites win. But he's saying it's more than that. If you win against us, we'll like be subject to you. And then, but he said, if I kill your guy, you know, you guys are all subject to us. Now, David was the son of a Ephrathite named Jesse, who was from Bethlehem in Judah. Jesse had 8 sons, and in Saul's time he was very old. Jesse's 3 oldest sons had followed Saul to the war. The firstborn was Eliab, the second Abinadab, and the third Shammah. David was the youngest. The 3 oldest followed Saul. But David went back and forth from Saul to tend his father's sheep at Bethlehem. So you have to recall from just the video before this one, Saul actually, it's called took David into service. Like he needed another military guy because someone said that he could play the guitar and he's a warrior. So he needed another military guy, but mainly he asked him to play the lyre. And so he would feel better whenever this evil spirit would bother him. But David, he would always go home to take care of his father's interests, because if you own sheep, then you're kind of rich, and then you would have to like take care of the sheep and then sell the sheep to make money. So he went back and forth. He had like two jobs. He had to work for the king, and then he had to like go home and work for his family business. Okay, verse 16. For 40 days the Philistine came forth every morning and evening. So twice a day, Goliath, stepped forward, in front of this gigantic army and took his stand. Now Jesse said to his son David, "Take this ephah of roasted grain and these 10 loaves of bread for your brothers and hurry to their camp. Take along these 10 cheeses to the commander of their unit. See how your brothers are, and bring back some assurance from them. They are with Saul and all the men of Israel in the valley of Elah, fighting against the Philistines." Early in the morning, David left the flock in the care of a shepherd. So, they had servants, they had people working for them. Loaded up and set out, as Jesse had directed. He reached the camp as the army was going out to its battle positions, shouting the war cry. Israel and the Philistines were drawing up their lines, facing each other. David left his things with the keeper of supplies, ran to the battle lines, and asked his brothers how they were. As he was talking with them, okay, so David is brave. Remember, from the earlier video, one of Saul's attendants or servants said, "I seen a guy who could play the lyre, and he's brave and he's a good warrior, among other things." So you have to remember this. If you've gone to a game, like a football game or a basketball game or a hockey game, there are so many people, right? Sometimes when you see that many people, I don't know how to describe it, but you feel like small, like you could get lost because there's like so many people. But this is war, so people are like really fired up and yelling and screaming, in the warrior way. And then, how would you like to run down onto the field, let's say during a football game, when there's like a timeout, that takes a lot of courage, So David is a very brave person. While all the army is already starting to line up for battle, he just runs out there and tries to. "Have you seen my brothers?" He's a younger person. "Have you seen my brothers? They're around here." And it's all like people "Rah!" So I just noticed that. So he was talking to his brothers. Then Goliath, the Philistine champion from Gath, stepped out from his lines and shouted his usual defiance, and David heard it. Whenever the Israelites saw Goliath, They all fled from him in great fear. So he is a frightening, monstrous, gigantic person. Now the Israelites had been saying, "Do you see how this man keeps coming out? He comes out to defy Israel. The king will give great wealth to the man who kills him. He will also give him his daughter in marriage, and will exempt his family from taxes in Israel." David asked the men standing near him, "What will be done for the man who kills this Philistine and removes this disgrace from Israel? Who is this uncircumcised Philistine that he should defy the armies of the living God?" They repeated to him what they had been saying and told him, "This is what will be done for the man who kills him." This is a super secret, but the men that David was talking to, they were Kadosh Malakim in human form. They wanted to look like people. Remember, the Lord, God, the Creator, He is everywhere. He sees everything, but He's like invisible and inaudible. You can't hear Him. Well, He's always around. But remember, He has these trusted associates, the Kadosh Malakim. A lot of the time you can't see them, but then it seems, if you watch my earlier videos, they will look like a human being. So they like came down, probably just appeared out of nowhere, wanted to look like human beings, and they want to see what's going on. They want to watch. They want to watch Israel defeat the Philistines. Remember, they're on Israel's side. When Eliab, David's oldest brother, heard him speaking with the men, he burned with anger at him and asked, "Why have you come down here? And with whom did you leave those few sheep in the wilderness?" So he's mad at him because he's small, like he's a smaller. Remember, he's not as tall yet. He's kind of like a boy, he's a young person. He's not mad at him because he hates his brother. He's mad at him because he's his baby brother. You could get hurt. And with whom did you leave those few sheep in the wilderness? I know how conceited you are and how wicked your heart is. You came down only to watch the battle. "Now what have I done?" said David. "Can't I even speak?" He then turned away to someone else. He sounds like a youngest, a youngest child. "Now, what did I do? What? Yeah. Now, what have I done?" said David. "Can't I even speak?" He then turned away to someone else and brought up the same matter. And the men answered him as before. So he heard it 3 times. I mentioned that people back then were not the same as they are now. For some reason, King David, when he was very young, he wanted to hear that the king will give him a lot of money, his daughter to marry, and his family will not have to be taxed. What David said was overheard and reported to Saul, and Saul sent for him. David said to Saul, "Let no one lose heart on account of this Philistine. Your servant will go and fight him." Saul, remember he's the king, replied, "You are not able to go out against this Philistine and fight him. You are only a young man, and he has been a warrior from his youth." But David said to Saul, "Your servant has been keeping his father's sheep. When a lion or a bear came and carried off a sheep from the flock, I went after it, struck it, and rescued the sheep from its mouth. When it turned on me, I seized it by its hair, struck it, and killed it. Your servant has killed both the lion and the bear. This uncircumcised Philistine will be like one of them, because he has defied the armies of the living God." Here's another super secret. The armies of the living God are Kadosh Malakim. Surprise. Kadosh Malakim. They are holy angel warriors, but like Israelites, they are soldiers. And they are these guys. They're Kadosh Malakim. They're called the Lords of Hosts. The Lord is called the Lord of Hosts. Hosts are armies. So the Lord, Jesus, right? He gives his name later. The Lord, God, the Creator, the Son, he is the Lord of Hosts, many armies. So armies of the living God is like these Kadosh Malakim. Their army. So somehow, let's look back. Goliath offended them from earth when he said to Israel, remember God and all his Kadosh Malakim and these guys called Kadosh Hasidim, they hear everything. There's this character called the Watcher in the Marvel comics. Doesn't that guy see everything? He's always watching, right? And he's very powerful. And then he comes from a race of watchers, So you have to remember that Kadosh Malakim, they are also in armies. They're not just warriors that show up, all by themselves. One will just pop in. There are just like thousands and thousands of them. So, what I think offended the Kadosh Malakim, the Lords of Hosts, these armies of the living God, is when he said, "This day I defy the armies of Israel. Give me a man and let us fight each other." That is verse 10. 1 Samuel 17, verse 10. When Goliath said that, made heaven very angry. So remember, I said super secret. David was talking to some Kadosh Malakim. They were Lords of Hosts. That's another name for Kadosh Malakim. They're Lords of Hosts. They probably told him, it's not written down here, that they came down and wanted to look like humans because they wanted to watch Israel defeat the Philistines. But they probably told him, David, my boy, Goliath, we want him dead. He offends God and he offends us. You have to remember, a good question is, Jimmy, then why don't they just kill the guy himself? Because he's a giant. Now, they wouldn't quite want to do that because he's one guy, you know. You still have to fight him one on one. And it sounds funny, but one Kadosh Malakim, if he, you know what I mean? Like, they have to show you their true form, right? If he's like, alright, I was just, a Kadosh Malakim, one of these lords of hosts, you know, they're like, alright, you want to fight me, Goliath? Alright. Alright, I'm going to show you, you know, my true form, you know. One of them would be like 5,000 feet tall. I'm not kidding. And that's not a fair fight, you know. No. I know it sounds funny, but it's not a fair fight, you know. Let's say the Kadosh Malakim, the most popular, you know, character, we're sticking with Marvel, is probably Hulk, right? Now, is it fair if someone like a tall, let's see, is it fair if Hulk fights Fred Flintstone? Do some of you know who Fred Flintstone is? He's this cartoon character that's a caveman. Fred Flintstone. Yeah. Okay. Let's just make it a taller, scarier Fred Flintstone. You know, Fred Flintstone isn't that strong. He's like taller, scarier, a little stronger Fred Flintstone. Hulk, it's not fair, you know. Hulk would just like, pow, you know, and kill him like that. So, you know, the Coach Malakim would probably talking to David, you know, that's a super secret. We want you to kill that guy. He offends us. He offends heaven. So let's try to find where we were. We're right here. Now, see, they're going to fight. David and Goliath are going to fight. So, Saul is now talking to David. You know, he told him, I could do it. And then Saul's probably looking at David. You're a shorter dude, but you say you have killed lions and bears, or a lion and a bear? Okay, so Saul said to David, go for it, give it a shot, you know, go, and the Lord be with you. Then Saul dressed David in his own tunic. He put a coat of armor on him and a bronze helmet on his head. David fastened on his sword over the tunic and tried walking around, but he was not used to them. So here Saul did not put his clothes and his did not put his clothes. You know, sometimes you read it really quickly. It sounds like he put his clothes and his armor on David, and he's tall and David's short, so David said, these are too big for me, oversized. But when I'm reading this, Saul gave David like a better armor. You know what I mean? Because the king has like the best armor. You know, sometimes there's like gold on it. And then if you're like a starting warrior, you know, you haven't killed many people, you haven't like plundered many people, your armor is like shittier. Pardon me. Crappier. So I think Saul, because David is young and he just entered Saul's service. So the armor that he would get is like not that good, you know. So I think what Saul did is he like snapped his fingers and said, "Give him something that's like almost as good as mine, like a lot better than the armor that is like a starter." You know, like he just got into the service, so he Saul wants to give him like, you know, like a officer's like better armor. And then David said, "I cannot go in these," he said to Saul, "because I am not used to them." See, David is like a very proper person. He just sort of, you know, it's not right. You know, I just started. I don't want to sort of lie to myself and, you know, wear this armor that's, you know, I have, in the future I'll wear it, you know, I'll deserve it. He said, "I cannot wear that. You know, I'm not used to them." So he said, I'm not used to, you know, this strategy. He just does things like very properly, you know. So he took them off. Then he took his staff in his hand, chose 5 smooth stones from the stream, put them in the pouch of his shepherd's bag, and with his sling in his hand approached the Philistine. So he's wearing armor. It's not written here, but he's wearing, you know, it's ridiculous, you know. There's this movie called Troy, Troy, and this character named Achilles fights Hector, you know. They're both wearing armor. And earlier, Hector's brother Paris has to fight this big warrior, and Paris is wearing armor. So in like pictures where David is fighting Goliath, and Goliath has armor on, and he's just wearing like some kind of like drapey clothes, and he's wearing sandals. I don't think that's true, you know. No, you know, it's not right. You know, let's say boxing, right? Both people have to be like properly attired. You know, they both have to have gloves on. They both have to have the right shorts on. You know, they have to have the right shoes or boots. I don't know what they're called. You know, before you put the gloves on, you have to like wrap your hand. You know, sometimes they have something in their mouth. Everything has to be, you know, has to be boxing related. So when he goes to fight Goliath, he has to have armor on. So he's wearing like the lower, you know, the starting warrior, just like I call lousy. He's wearing lousy armor, you know, like. But he probably has a lousy sword, and then he also has a staff, because you always have a sword and you always have a shield. So he's wearing lousy armor, and he has his lousy sword, because, you know, he just started. He just entered into Saul's service. And he has his lousy shield. But then he wants to like hold on to his staff too. And he has 5 stones. And then he has like a slingshot. So he has a sword and a shield, a stick, and a slingshot. So he has like 3 weapons, some rocks, and a shield. The staff can be a weapon, you know, like a boom. You can hit someone with a stick. Okay, verse 41. Meanwhile, the Philistines with his shield bearer. The Philistine, Goliath. Meanwhile, the Philistine, Goliath, with his shield bearer in front of him, kept coming closer to David. He looked David over and saw that he was little more than a boy, glowing with health and handsome, and he despised him. He said to David, "Am I a dog that you come at me with sticks?" And the Philistine cursed David by his gods. "Come here," he said, "and I will give your flesh to the birds and the wild animals." David said to the Philistine, "You come against me with sword and spear and javelin." Okay, so remember, the Philistine has sword, spear, and javelin, but David has sword, staff, and slingshot. "But I come against you in the name of the Lord Almighty, the God of the armies of Israel, whom you have defied. This day the Lord will deliver you into my hands, and I'll strike you down and cut off your head. This very day I will give the carcasses of the Philistine army to the birds and the wild animals, and the whole world will know that there is a God in Israel. All those gathered here will know that it is not by sword or spear that the Lord saves. For the battle is the Lord's, and he will give all of you into our hands." As the Philistine moved closer to attack him, David ran quickly toward the battle line to meet him. Reaching into his bag and taking out a stone, he slung it and struck the Philistine on the forehead. The stone sank into his forehead, and he fell face down on the ground. So it's like a slingshot's usually like this, but back then I think it looked different. There's I think it was a stick, and then it was like a longer piece of leather, and then there was like some sort of pouch or bag, and then another piece of leather, and then like a stick, and then he would like swing it like this, and then throw it out, or I don't know how he did it. Throw it under or over. I'm not sure. But the stone or the rock hit Goliath so hard on the head, he died. And he fell face down. So he hit him in the head, and he's like, and then the guy fell forward. So you see that in the movies, Goliath fell face forward that way. Hit him in the head, he boom, and then Goliath just fell. So David triumphed over the Philistine with a sling and a stone. One stone, the first shot, the first stone. He probably was looking at the guy all mean, and took a stone from his bag. First shot killed him. See, David's cool. God's cool, because remember, God is with him. Without a sword in his hand, he struck down the Philistine and killed him. He's dead. David ran and stood over him. He took hold of the Philistine sword. He took Goliath's sword and drew it from the sheath. After he killed him, he cut off his head with the sword. So he didn't kill him again. This is just the way they spoke before. They like to repeat themselves. When the Philistines saw that their hero was dead, they turned and ran. Then the men of Israel and Judah surged forward with a shout and pursued the Philistines to the entrance of Gath and to the gates of Ekron. Their dead were strewn along the Sha'araim road. Sha'araim, that's hard to say too. The Sha'araim road to Gath and Ekron. When the Israelites returned from chasing the Philistines, they plundered their camp. David took the Philistine's big head, right? He's 9 feet tall. David took the Philistine's head and brought it to Jerusalem. He put the Philistines' weapons in his own tent. So he stole the guy's weapons. Remember, he had a sword, a spear, and a javelin. As Saul watched David going out to meet the Philistine, he said to Abner, commander of the army, Abner, whose son is that young man? Abner replied, as surely as you live, your majesty, I don't know. The king said, find out whose son this young man is. So Saul's not being dumb, He knows it's Jesse's son. So all Saul and Abner are saying is, whoa, they're doing something like that. That's Jesse's son, who is that Lone Ranger? Who was that masked man? Or it's something like, what sort of man might Jesse be to have 8 sons and one of them could kill a giant so easily? They're like, whoa, They know who his father is, Jesse. So Jesse, even though he's old, we didn't know it. When he was young, he must have been mighty. As soon as David returned from killing the Philistine, Abner took him and brought him before Saul. And David still holding the Philistine's head. Whose son are you, young man? David said. It just seems ridiculous. A long time ago, they like to repeat themselves. Whose son are you, young man? And David said, I am the son of your servant, Jesse of Bethlehem. So he gave honor to his father, Jesse. It's very interesting. David, he's very young, but then when he saw the giant, he also hated him, all the Israelites. Then he talked to, I think so, this is a super secret, the Kadosh Malakim, warrior army commanders. Says there are a few of them. They said, we hate this guy too. David, we want you to kill him. I mean, they're commanders, higher beings. They just told David, he's one of their soldiers. Kill him. One dead. He offends heaven. So he honored heaven by killing him, right? He did what they said. And then, remember, he wants money. He wants to marry the king's daughter. And then he wants his family to not have to pay taxes. And then God is with him. Remember, he has been anointed with a horn by Samuel already. So God's favor, God likes David. So he also honored God by killing Goliath. And of course, by killing Goliath, somehow he honored the king, right? Because it's always like that, when you win, you win for God and king and country, So when you won, it was like a win for the king, and then he honored his father. So he's a very nice person. Honored everyone. Honored God. Honored the Kadosh Malach. Honored, his father. Honored, the king. And honored his fellow Israelites by also hating them. Hating the giant. And then, it doesn't. There's no. It's not. I'm supposing, but he's probably like, because he's not dumb. He's like, money. I'm gonna marry the king's daughter. All right, thank you for listening. Was a long video. Remember, stay safe these days. Safety first. Wear a mask sometimes. And remember, keep God first. He'll take you places.